a retired police dog with a scarred past, a mother fighting to get her daughter back, and a night that will force them all over the edge, literally. The wind howled over the cliffs of Haven Ridge, carrying the salty scent of the sea. Duke, a retired German shepherd with a graying muzzle, trotted beside Jacob, his former handler. His ears twitched at the distant cry of gulls, his instincts still sharp despite his age. Jacob limped slightly, his bad knee aching from the cold. "Easy, boy," he murmured, scratching Duke's head. The dog leaned into the touch, his dark eyes scanning the horizon, always on duty, even in retirement. Lila wiped sweat from her brow as she stacked dirty plates at the diner. Her feet ached, but she forced a smile for the customers. Every tip went into the jar labeled Sophie's Future. In her pocket, a crumpled court notice mocked her. Custody, hearing delayed. She blinked back tears. "Just a little longer, baby," she whispered to Sophie's photo taped to her locker. The dinner rush buzzed around her, but all she heard was silence. Sophie curled under a thin blanket in her foster home, clutching a torn picture of Lila. Downstairs, the TV blared, and the foster parents argued. "Mommy's coming back," she whispered to the stuffed bunny Duke had sniffed at the park last week. A floorboard creaked. She froze, hoping they wouldn't remember she'd missed dinner again. Outside, rain tapped the window like a promise. Click, clack. Duke's paws echoed in her dreams. Lila stared at the eviction notice on her apartment door. Rent was due, and her tips wouldn't cover it. The sky darkened, mirroring her dread. At the foster agency, Elena sighed. "The judge wants more time, Lila." Lila's nails dug into her palms. "Sophie can't wait," she cried. Thunder rolled as Victor's smirk flashed in her memory. Across town, Duke growled at the storm, his fur bristling. Jacob frowned. "What's got you spooked, boy?" Duke lunged forward, dragging Jacob toward the cliffs. "Whoa!" Jacob yanked the leash. But Duke barked sharply, a sound he hadn't made since his police days. Then Jacob heard it too. A child's whimper. Heart pounding, he followed Duke through the brambles. A tiny shoe lay in the mud. "Sophie's?" Duke sniffed the air, tail rigid. Jacob pulled out his phone. "Lila, we need to talk, now." The wind swallowed his words as the storm broke overhead. Lila nearly dropped her tray when Duke nuzzled her hand at the diner. "He never does that," Jacob said, stunned. Duke whined, staring at her with unnerving intensity. Lila knelt, scratching his ears. "Hey, brave boy." For a moment, the weight on her chest eased. Then the bell jingled. Victor strode in, his grin venomous. Duke's growl vibrated against Lila's leg. Jacob's eyes narrowed. "You know that guy?" Lila's voice trembled. "He's Sophie's father." Victor cornered Lila behind the diner. "You owe me," he hissed, grabbing her wrist. Duke's bark shattered the tension as Jacob rounded the corner. Victor released her, sneering. "Cute dog. Shame if something happened to it." Lila's blood ran cold. That night she sobbed into her pillow. Duke, miles away, paced Jacob's living room. He pawed at the door, whimpering. Jacob sighed. "I know, boy. Something's wrong." Outside, lightning split the sky. Lila's boss shoved her final paycheck at her. "Victor's bad for business," she begged, but he turned away. Rain soaked her clothes as she stumbled home. No job, no Sophie, no hope. At the cliff's edge, she screamed into the void. Duke's bark echoed in reply. Had she imagined it? Her phone buzzed. Elena. Sophie's foster home reported her missing. Lila's knees buckled. "Victor took her," she gasped. Somewhere, Duke howled. Elena slammed her fist on the desk. "Sophie's gone, and you're calling it a family matter." The cop shrugged. "No evidence of foul play." Elena stormed out, dialing Lila. "Meet me at Jacob's. Bring Duke." Meanwhile, Sophie huddled in Victor's truck, her wrists raw from rope burns. "Duke will find me," she whispered. Victor laughed. "That old mutt? He's probably dead." The truck sped toward the warehouses. Duke, ears pricked, bolted toward the sound of tires on gravel. Sophie kicked as Victor dragged her into the warehouse. "Mommy," she wailed. Victor gagged her. "Quiet, brat." Her bunny fell from her pocket, landing in the dirt. Miles away, Duke froze mid-step, ears twitching. He tore toward the cliffs, Jacob shouting behind him. At the warehouse, Victor's phone rang. "Lila, too late to beg." Lila's voice was steel. "Touch her and I'll kill you." Duke's bark pierced the night. Closer now. Sophie's tears sparkled in the moonlight. Lila's hands shook as she dialed Jacob. "Victor has Sophie. He's at the old docks." Elena gripped her shoulder. "We'll find her." Meanwhile, Duke pawed at Sophie's lost bunny near the cliffs, whining. Jacob picked it up. The fabric smelled like crayons and baby shampoo. Duke barked sharply. "This is Sophie," pulling toward the shadowy warehouse district. Lila's car screeched up beside them. "Get in," she yelled. The hunt had begun. The police dismissed Lila's plea. "She's with her father. It's not a crime." Elena cursed under her breath. "Then we go ourselves." Jacob loaded Duke into the truck, the dog's nose pressed to the window. Lila clutched Sophie's bunny like a lifeline. "Where would Victor hide her?" Duke growled at a turnoff. A rusted sign read, "Havenridge Storage." Jacob's jaw tightened. "Bingo!" Headlights off, they crept toward the warehouses. Somewhere inside, Sophie hiccuped in the dark. Duke lunged from the truck before it stopped, snarling at Warehouse 7. "He's got her scent," Jacob whispered. Lila's pulse roared in her ears. A broken window revealed shadows moving inside, Victor's voice, then Sophie's muffled cry. Duke's ears flattened. He nudged Lila's hand as if saying, "Stay behind me." Elena called for backup, but Jacob shook his head. "No time." Lila grabbed a rusted pipe. "Then we go now." Duke led the charge, silent as a ghost. Victor's laugh echoed inside. "Daddy's got plans for you, Sophie." Lila's vision blurred with rage. Jacob held her back. "We need a plan." Duke crouched low, eyes locked on the door. Elena whispered, "I'll distract him. You and Duke get Sophie." Lila nodded, gripping Jacob's arm. "Please, save her." Duke licked her wrist, a promise. A crash echoed from inside. Sophie screamed. "Now!" Jacob hissed. Duke burst through the door like a black bolt of lightning. Chaos erupted. Victor's men shouted as Duke tore past them, zeroing in on Sophie's whimpers. Lila sprinted after him, pipe raised. "Sophie!" Her daughter was tied to a chair, face streaked with dirt. Victor lunged, but Duke sank teeth into his leg. "Get off!" Victor kicked, sending Duke skidding. Jacob tackled Victor as Lila freed Sophie. "Mommy!" Sophie sobbed into her neck. Elena yelled, "Run!" But Victor's men blocked the exit. Duke bared his teeth, outnumbered but unbroken. Duke herded Lila and Sophie toward a back exit, snarling at the thugs. "This way!" Jacob shoved a shelf into their pursuer's path. Outside, rain lashed their faces. Sophie clung to Duke's fur as they ran. "Good dog," she hiccuped. Victor's roar echoed behind them. "You're dead, Lila." Duke veered toward the cliffs, his only thought. Protect. Lila stumbled. "We can't outrun them." Jacob scooped Sophie up. "Duke knows where to go." The dog's bark cut through the storm. "Follow me." Lila's lungs burned, but she pushed harder. Sophie's arms around her neck were her fuel. "Almost there, baby." Duke led them to a fishing shack, its door hanging loose. Inside, Jacob barricaded the entrance. "Backup's coming," Elena panted. Sophie trembled. "Is Duke hurt?" The dog licked her cheek, though blood matted his shoulder. Lila pressed her forehead to his. "You're our hero." Distant shouts made them freeze. Victor wasn't giving up. Duke's growl rumbled. "Let him try." Jacob's hands shook as he reloaded his old service pistol. "Last time I used this." Flashbacks struck, smoke, gunfire, Duke dragging him to safety as bullets flew. His leg had given out that day, ending his career. Now Duke stared at him, the same determined glint. "We're finishing this together, boy," Jacob whispered. Outside, Victor's voice taunted, "Send out my kid and I'll let you live." Sophie buried her face in Lila's chest. Duke's lips curled. Never again. Elena spotted a crumpled drawing near the shack's door, Sophie's childish scrawl of a big black dog. "She left us a trail," she breathed. Duke sniffed it, then nudged a loose floorboard. Underneath, a candy wrapper Sophie must have dropped. "She's smart," Jacob said grimly. Victor's footsteps crunched closer. Lila kissed Sophie's hair. "Whatever happens, stay with Duke." The dog positioned himself in front of Sophie, ears pinned back. A shadow filled the broken window. Too late to run. Victor's face appeared in the window, grinning. "Found you." He leveled a gun. Duke lunged, but Jacob fired first, a warning shot. Victor ducked. "You'll regret that." His phone rang. He answered, mocking. "Lila begging already?" But it was Elena's backup. Sirens wailed in the distance. Victor spat. "This isn't over." He vanished into the storm. Lila collapsed, sobbing. Duke nosed Sophie's hand, checking for wounds. "He's gone," Jacob said. But Duke stiffened. "Number, he's circling back." Here's the next gripping installment, chapters 21 to 30, where the story reaches its heart-pounding climax, Duke's sacrifice, the cliffside battle, and the aftermath that will leave readers in tears. Duke slipped into the warehouse's shadows, his paws silent on the concrete. Sophie's scent, fear, and strawberry shampoo guided him. Victor's men laughed by a flickering lantern, unaware. A whimper came from a back room. Duke flattened himself, slinking past Sophie tied to a chair, her wrists red. She gasped when she spotted him. "Duke!" He nudged her bonds with his nose, teeth carefully gripping the rope. "Hold on, little one." Jacob's voice crackled on Lila's stolen walkie-talkie. "Distraction in 3, 2. A deafening crash echoed as Jacob toppled a shelf in the far corridor. Victor's men cursed, running toward the noise. "Now, Duke!" Lila whispered fiercely. The dog tore at Sophie's ropes until they frayed. Sophie wriggled free, flinging her arms around Duke's neck. Footsteps pounded closer. Too late. Victor loomed in the doorway, blocking their escape. "Well," he sneered, "look what the mutt dragged in." Victor grabbed Sophie's arm. She screamed, kicking. Duke lunged, but Victor swung a pistol, striking Duke's head. The dog crumpled. "Duke," Sophie wailed. Lila burst in, pipe raised, but Victor aimed the gun at her. "Drop it!" Jacob appeared behind Victor, but froze when the gun shifted to Sophie's temple. "Everyone stay put," Victor hissed. Duke stirred, his vision blurry. He saw Sophie's tears, Lila's terror. With a growl, he forced himself up. "Not while I breathe." Victor dragged Sophie backward. "You'll never see her again, Lila." Duke's legs trembled, but he bared his teeth. One chance. As Victor's finger tightened on the trigger, Duke launched. The gun fired. A searing pain grazed Duke's shoulder, but he slammed into Victor's chest. The man fell, the gun skidding away. Sophie scrambled free. Jacob tackled Victor, pinning him. Lila scooped Sophie up. "Run!" she yelled to Elena. Duke staggered after them, blood matting his fur. The chase wasn't over. Rain sheeted down as they fled the warehouse. Victor's shouts faded behind them. "He'll follow," Jacob panted. Duke limped ahead, leading them toward the cliffs, the only path left. Sophie clung to Lila, her tiny fists twisted in Duke's fur. "You're bleeding," she whispered to him. Duke licked her hand. "Worth it." Headlights suddenly cut through the dark, Victor's truck barreling toward them. "Cliffs! Now!" Jacob roared. Duke herded them forward, his body a shield between them and the truck's roaring engine. Victor's truck fishtailed in the mud, gaining fast. Lila stumbled. Jacob hauled her up. Duke snarled, turning to face the vehicle. "Duke, no!" Sophie screamed. At the last second, Duke dodged and Victor swerved. The truck's bumper clipped him, sending him rolling. Sophie sobbed as Duke struggled to his feet. "Leave him!" Jacob yelled, but Lila hesitated. Duke barked sharply. "Go!" Then turned back to Victor, who was climbing from the wrecked truck. The dog's muzzle dripped blood. This ended here. Victor advanced, a knife glinting. "Stupid dog." Duke feinted left, then charged, knocking Victor off balance. They grappled at the cliff's edge, rocks skittering into the void below. Lila screamed Duke's name. Victor slashed. Duke dodged, but the knife sliced his flank. With a last surge of strength, Duke lunged. His full weight slammed into Victor's chest. The man's eyes widened as he toppled backward, clawing at air. Duke tried to scramble back, but the ground gave way. Both vanished over the edge. Lila collapsed at the cliff's edge, screaming Duke's name into the abyss. Sophie wailed, straining against Jacob's grip. "He saved us," Jacob whispered, raw. The wind howled, swallowing their grief. Then a weak whine. "Duke!" Lila scrambled down a narrow ledge. There, on a jutting rock, Duke lay motionless. Victor's body sprawled on the rocks below. Blood pooled beneath the dog. "He's alive," she sobbed. Jacob radioed for help, voice cracking. Sophie reached Duke first, her tears falling on his face. "Don't leave me." The rescue team hauled Duke up in a stretcher. His breathing was shallow, eyes half-lidded. Sophie pressed her face to his. "You're the best dog ever." The vet's words were grim. "Massive blood loss. Broken leg. It's touch and go." Lila gripped Duke's paw. "Fight, boy, please." That night, as machines beeped, Duke dreamed of chasing sticks with Sophie. Her laughter was his compass, a warm lick, a final wag. Then light. Morning light revealed Duke's chest still rising. The vet smiled. "He's a fighter," Sophie cheered, climbing onto the cot to hug him. Jacob wiped his eyes. Lila kissed Duke's head. "Thank you," she breathed. Outside, reporters swarmed. Duke was a hero, but all that mattered was the quiet moment when Duke's tail thumped weakly against Sophie's leg. Victor was gone. The storm had passed, and somehow, against all odds, this broken little family was whole. Jacob scrambled down the slippery cliffside, rocks cutting into his palms. "Duke!" he shouted into the wind. Then a weak whimper. His heart stopped. 10 feet below, Duke lay motionless on a narrow ledge, his fur matted with blood. Victor's body was just visible on the jagged rocks. Jacob inched closer, his bad leg screaming in protest. Duke's tail gave a single, feeble thump. His golden eyes met Jacob's, full of pain but alive. Leela clung to Sophie above them, shielding her daughter's eyes from the gruesome sight below. He's breathing," Jacob yelled. With shaking hands, he wrapped Duke in his jacket, whispering, "You stubborn old hero." As emergency lights finally pierced the darkness, Duke licked Jacob's hand once before his eyes fluttered shut. The veterinary clinic buzzed with frantic energy. "BP's dropping," a nurse called out as they wheeled Duke into surgery. Sophie pressed her stuffed bunny to the observation window. "Will Duke go to doggy heaven?" she asked in a small voice. Lila knelt beside her. "Not today, baby." But her hands trembled. The vet had said it was worse than they'd thought. Internal bleeding, a shattered hip. Jacob paced like a caged animal. "He survived gunfire in 2021, he muttered. "Come on, Duke." When the surgeon finally emerged, his mask was speckled with blood. "He's stable, for now." Behind them, unnoticed, Elena wiped her eyes. The custody paperwork in her bag suddenly seemed unimportant. The beeping monitor marked Duke's shallow breaths. Sophie slept curled beside him, her tiny hand buried in his fur. Lila studied the X-rays illuminated on the wall, metal fragments from Duke's police days still lodged near his spine. All these years, he was in pain. Jacob gently adjusted Duke's fourth, never slowed him down. His voice broke. Should have retired him sooner. Duke's ear twitched at the sound of their voices. His tail stirred weakly against Sophie's leg. Outside, dawn painted the sky in hopeful pinks and oranges. For the first time in years, Lila prayed. Detective Ruiz slapped a file on the table. "Crane's dead, broken neck." He nodded at Duke's bandaged form. "Your dog's a lethal weapon." Sophie hugged Duke tighter. "He's a good dog," the detective softened. "That he is." He slid a photo toward Lila. Victor's warehouse hideout, walls papered with surveillance shots of her and Sophie. "He was never letting either of you go." Jacob's fist clenched. "And the Foster family?" "Under investigation." Ruiz hesitated. "Social Services is fast-tracking Sophie's case. Seems your hero dog changed some minds." As they left, Duke managed to lift his head, watching Lila through the rear-view mirror until the station disappeared from view. The vet cleared his throat. His police training saved him. That roll mid-fall protected his organs. He gestured to Duke's cast, "But he'll never walk without a limp." Sophie immediately knelt, pressing her forehead to Duke's. "I'll be your cane." Lila's eyes welled as Duke licked Sophie's tears away. Jacob discreetly wiped his own eyes on his sleeve. That night, as Duke slept between them on Jacob's couch, Lila whispered, "We can't separate them now." Jacob stroked Duke's ears. "Wasn't planning to." Outside, the first winter snow began to fall, blanketing the blood-stained cliffs in forgiving white. Duke hated the wheelchair. "Easy, champ," Jacob chuckled as the dog grumbled, dragging himself forward with his front paws. Sophie had decorated the contraption with glittery stickers that spelled Duke won. "Look," Sophie dropped a tennis ball just out of reach. Duke huffed, then launched himself forward and promptly toppled over. Lila rushed in. "Sophie Grace!" But Duke was already wagging ball triumphantly in his mouth. Sophie giggled as he dropped it in her lap. "Again!" From the doorway, Elena smiled. The custody recommendation letter in her pocket was already signed. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and anxiety. Judge Wilkins reviewed Elena's report. "Miss Grayson, your actions during the abduction were extraordinary." Lila clutched Sophie's hand. Duke sat obediently beside them, his service vest a silent testament. The judge's gaze lingered on Duke's scars. "It seems love took many forms in this case." The gavel cracked. "Custody is granted." Sophie's shriek of joy made the bailiff jump. Duke barked, his first since the cliff, and the entire courtroom applauded. Jacob knelt beside Duke's therapy pool. "Remember your water retrievals, boy." Duke gave him a withering look, but paddled obediently. Sophie cheered from the edge, her tiny life jacket nearly swallowing her. Later, as Jacob toweled Duke off, he noticed it. The old dog was standing straighter. "Miracle Pool," the therapist shrugged. Or Miracle Kid. Through the window they watched Lila push Sophie on a swing, Duke limping happily beside them. Jacob's chest ached in the best way. The custody hearing was supposed to be a formality. Until Victor's mother appeared. "My son wasn't perfect," Mrs. Crane spat, "but that animal murdered him." Duke growled low in his throat. Sophie buried her face in his Medical reports show Mr. Crane was high on methamphetamines. The fall killed him, not the dog. The judge's eyes hardened. This hearing is about Sophie's safety, which, thanks to Duke, is no longer in question. As Mrs. Crane stormed out, Duke rested his head on Sophie's knee. The message was clear. "I'd do it again." The celebration at Jacob's house was chaos. Mayor Schultz presented Duke with a medal. Havenridge's bravest, Sophie insisted Duke wear it over his heart. "Now you're a prince." Lila laughed until she cried, hugging Jacob impulsively. He stiffened, then awkwardly patted her back. That night, as fireworks lit up the harbor, Duke snored on Sophie's bed, his cast finally off. In the living room, Lila and Jacob clinked beer bottles over Duke's old police file, now stamped "Case Closed" in bold red letters. The entire town crowded into Haven Ridge Park for Duke Day. Streamers fluttered between the trees, and a massive bone-shaped cake sat on the picnic table. Sophie gripped Duke's leash tightly as strangers kept petting him. "Easy, boy," she whispered as he leaned against her leg. He wasn't used to this much attention. Mayor Schultz boomed into the microphone, "This dog represents the best of us." The crowd cheered. Duke yawned. Lila squeezed Jacob's arm. "Look." A little boy with a leg brace was kneeling beside Duke, whispering something. Duke licked his cheek and the boy beamed. As the sunset painted the sky gold, Sophie tugged Jacob down to her level. "Can we keep him forever?" Jacob's throat tightened. "Yeah, kid, we can." The letter arrived in a plain envelope, postmarked the day Victor died. Lila's hands shook as she read it aloud. "If you're reading this, I lost. There's $80,000 buried near the old lighthouse. Take it. Just tell Sophie I wasn't always a monster." Jacob snatched the paper. "This is a trap." But Duke was already at the door, wagging his tail. Sophie looked back and forth between them. "Is Daddy in hell now?" The silence stretched until Duke nudged Lila's hand with his nose. "Let's finish this." Rain lashed the cliffs as they searched near the crumbling lighthouse. Duke limped ahead, sniffing the ground. "This is pointless," Jacob shouted over the wind. Then Duke froze. His ears pricked forward. Sophie gasped. "He found it!" A rusted ammunition box lay half-buried near a twisted pine. Inside, bundled in plastic, were stacks of cash and a faded ultrasound photo. Sophie, 8 weeks. Lila sank to her knees. Victor had kept it all these years. Duke whined and licked her face as the storm raged around them. Back at Jacob's kitchen table, they counted the money. $87,430 in total. Elena tapped the legal pad. This could buy a house, college fund, but it's dirty money. Sophie clutched the ultrasound photo. "Daddy loved me once." Duke rested his head on her lap as Lila made her decision. "We're keeping it. For Sophie." Jacob stiffened. "That's evidence." "And Victor's dead." Lila's voice was steel. "Let something good finally come from him." Outside, the first stars appeared as Duke watched over them all. The sold sign swung proudly in front of the little blue house next to Jacob's. Sophie raced through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoing. "This one's Duke's," she yelled from a sunlit corner. Lila smiled as Jacob helped her carry boxes. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." His ears turned pink. "Someone's got to keep an eye on you two." Duke explored his new yard, pausing to sniff the fence line. This was home now. That night, as Sophie slept in her new room, Lila found Jacob and Duke on the porch. The three of them sat in comfortable silence, watching the harbor lights twinkle. The bronze plaque gleamed in the morning sun. Duke, Haven Ridge's guardian. Sophie traced the letters with her finger. "It's not enough." Mayor Schultz chuckled. "What else should we do?" She pointed to the struggling animal shelter across the street. "That." 6 months later, the Duke Grayson Rescue Center opened its doors. The first guest was a 3-legged German Shepherd mix who licked Sophie's face. From his spot in the shade, Duke thumped his tail. "Good kid." Jacob's birthday cake was lopsided and covered in dog hair. "Made it myself," Sophie announced. Lila mouthed sorry as Jacob took a bite. Duke begged shamelessly at his feet until Jacob sighed and gave him a corner of cake. Traitor. Later, as fireworks exploded over the water, Sophie climbed into Jacob's lap. "Are you my grandpa now?" Lila choked on her wine. Jacob's eyes watered. If you want me to be." Duke wedged himself between them all, his tail sweeping happily across the deck. The family he'd saved was complete. The nightmares still came sometimes. Lila would wake gasping, reaching for Sophie. Victor's laughter would lumber in and rest his heavy head on her lap until her breathing slowed. Down the hall, she could hear Jacob telling Sophie one of his ridiculous cop stories. One evening, she found Duke staring at the cliffs where it had happened. "You miss it?" she asked softly. "The job?" He leaned against her, watching the sunset. After a moment, he licked her hand and limped back toward the house, toward Sophie's laughter, toward Jacob's terrible cooking, toward home. Some battles were meant to be left in the past. Duke's muzzle was almost entirely gray now. But when Sophie shouted, "Race you!" and took off down the beach, he gave chase, awkwardly, with his old limp, but with his ears flapping joyfully. Lila and Jacob followed at a distance. "He's slowing down," she murmured. Jacob nodded, blinking hard. "Not today, though." They watched as Duke finally caught Sophie, both of them collapsing into the surf, laughing and barking as the waves rolled in. For this moment, under the golden sun, time stood still. The fire crackled as Lila tucked Sophie in. "Duke stays with me tonight," Sophie declared, patting the blankets. The old dog heaved himself up with a grunt and circled 3 times before settling at her feet. Downstairs, Jacob poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "To Duke," he said hoarsely. Lila clinked her glass against his. "To family." Upstairs, Sophie whispered secrets into Duke's ear until her eyelids grew heavy. Outside, the ocean murmured against the shore, a lullaby for heroes. And in the warm glow of the nightlight, Duke kept watch over his girl, just as he always would.